Good morning, everyone. This is Sarah Q coming to you from my back deck in Brainerd. I hope you're doing well. You should see the way I've jerry-rigged my tripod. I didn't have a tripod, so my camera is sitting on a kitchen chair on top of the table on my deck with a googly eyes game board box and electrical tape. So next best thing, right? You do what you got to do in these times. So I want to thank Courtney for allowing me to bring a devotional to you today on Maundy Thursday, and I'll be leading the one on Good Friday as well, so that our church staff, including Courtney and Bess and Gerald and Bruce and Steve, can get the amazing worship service that they're planning for Easter Sunday morning together, so that you can experience that from the comfort of your own homes. And what I have to talk to you today about, I'm using the article that I wrote in the Contact that was mailed out last week as the springboard. This article just talked a little bit about the range of emotions that we have all been experiencing lately. As I was trying to figure out how to deal with all the feelings that I, as a human being, was experiencing, but also that other people around me in the church, in my family, and the youth that I work with on a daily basis were experiencing, I started looking to some literature, and I found this article that was written by Scott Baronaro in the Harvard Business Review. He's a grief expert, and he writes an article that says what we are experiencing is grief. And this article really resonated with me, so I wanted to share the Cliff's Notes version with you. Basically, he explained the concept of anticipatory grief. And this usually centers around the death of a loved one, especially in the cases where we know the death is coming because of a chronic illness or health problem that cannot be alleviated. And so we might experience the sense of a loss of control. Our mind goes to worst case scenarios and what ifs, and this causes a lot of stress and anxiety. And this is definitely happening for people as we experience the COVID-19 pandemic. We have lost our sense of safety because this virus is invisible and we don't know when we might encounter it. And the stages of anticipatory grief follow similar stages to that of grief, regular, post-event grief. Not everyone experiences these 5 things in the same order. It's going to very much depend on your life story and your circumstances about whether you skip a step altogether or you experience them in a different order. But he said generally people are going to experience denial with COVID-19. Denial that this virus is going to impact us on an individual level. This can't affect me, right? Then we're going to maybe experience anger. Schools are closed. I can't go to work. I can't make a living. Can't go do the fun things that I'm used to doing. I can't see my people. I'm angry. And I want to do what I want to do. Then there's bargaining. Well, okay, I can give you 2 weeks. If I can do 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or now it's a month or 5 weeks of social distancing, everything will be all right, right? And go back to life as normal. Then there's sadness. There's sadness in missing your relationships, in missing your job. Teachers were sad to not be in the classroom with students. A lot of students were sad to not be at school, especially if school is their safe place. And eventually we come to the terms of acceptance. And I think this is probably where most of us are at now, 3 or 4 weeks into this thing. We know this is happening. We know this is impacting and could potentially impact all of us directly. And this is where we find the power, because we learned that we can do things that we have control over to make the situation better. I can wash my hands for 20 seconds. I can maintain a safe distance from other human beings who could potentially infect me or my children or my other family members. I can, to some degree, learn to do my job from home, unless I'm an essential employee or a healthcare professional or one of the people that's just keeping our community going, and thank you to all of you. We can learn to adapt, though, and so this is where we can take some of that power back and not have so much anxiety. When I learned that I was going to be bringing this devotion to you on Maundy Thursday, I thought how appropriate, because I cannot think of another person in the world who must have experienced anticipatory grief like Jesus did, like Christ did, in the week leading up to his death. He was literally taking the world on his shoulders, and there was grieving that was involved in that process. And we get to see some of this in the New Testament as he moves from the triumphal entry and moves through that happy place to the anger that he experienced in the temple with the money changers. And then he goes into a much more solemn state of mind and reverent state of mind as we see him in the upper room with his disciples. And we see a serious side of Jesus, a contemplative side, the servant heart that he had when he washed the disciples' feet, and the joy that he experienced in sharing a meal with them, and keeping them close as he moved through this difficult experience. And then as he went to the Garden of Gethsemane, we see the anguish where he was sweating blood and he wanted the cup taken from him, but that he knew what was coming. He knew what to anticipate, so his anticipatory grief might have been a bit different than ours, but nonetheless he was grieving the loss of relationships and the loss of probably his earthly ministry. I think this is something that he enjoyed. So we can learn a lot in looking at the way Jesus lived his life in the last few days. During the pandemic, during our quarantine, we, especially if we live by ourselves, are not going to be able to surround ourselves with a dozen friends like Jesus did. But we can reach out to people. We can use our phone and our computer and our television to stay connected to the world. We can definitely continue to serve people, even if we can't give time. If we do have resources like money that we can donate to help the food bank and the other amazing community organizations that are taking care of our vulnerable members in the community, we can do that. We can pray. We can pray to God and express our sorrow and our angst and take time to listen and meditate with him every day, just as Jesus prayed in the garden. So I am heartened to know that Christ experienced this anticipatory grief. He knows what it is like to be fearful of what is coming, but he lived in the present moment, dealt with those emotions, talked to God the Father, and had faith that what was coming was going to be worth it and was going to be so much better than what any of the other humans on earth at the time could have imagined. And when I was doing some reading, another article mentioned that concept of anticipatory hope. And I think that is what we have to cling to, is hope. I'm going to read to you from John 16. Jesus knew they were dying to ask him what he meant. So he said, "Are you trying to figure out among yourselves what I meant when I said, 'In a day or so, you're not going to see me, but then in another day or so, you will see me'? Then fix this firmly in your minds. You're going to be in deep mourning while the godless world throws a party. You'll be sad, very, very sad, but your sadness will develop into gladness. When a woman gives birth, she has a hard time. There's no getting around it. But when the baby is born, there is joy in the birth. This new life in the world wipes out memory of the pain. The sadness you have right now is similar to that pain, but the coming joy is also similar. When I see you again, you'll be full of joy, and it will be a joy no one can rob from you. You'll no longer be so full of questions. Loss is loss. We're all going to experience it to different degrees, but hope is hope, and it is available for all of us. Jesus experienced loss, but he also experienced hope, and he knew that the hope and the joy that would come were worth it. So God's work was not to replace our sorrow with joy, but to turn our sorrow into joy. And he often does this through the really, really hard times in life. Dear Lord, Our lives are going to be filled with periods of grief, with periods of hope, and with periods of joy. Christ chose your will over his own desires, and we are grateful for that. Thank you for your continued presence in our lives during this uncertain time in our lives, and help us to know that you are always with us. In your heavenly name we pray. Amen. I want to give a quick shout out to Glenda Pinkard, who has been coloring artwork for months now, and every Sunday handing it out to church members. And Glenda, I love the art that I have been receiving from you, and this has been keeping my spot in my Bible the last few weeks, and it just makes me happy every time I see it. And I just wanted you and the congregation to know how much I appreciate you. P.S. After I quit videoing, I realized that I forgot to mention why Maundy Thursday is called Maundy Thursday. So just in case anyone is curious and doesn't already know, the word is derived from the Latin word mandatum, which means commandment. And it refers to when Jesus was in the upper room with his disciples during the Last Supper, and he gave the commandment that is in John 13, verses 34 and 35. Let me give you a new command. Love one another. In the same way I loved you, you love one another. This is how everyone will recognize that you are my disciples, when they see the love you have for each other. So may we go today and find ways to love one another in honor of Maundy Thursday.